The storm was unlike anything Willow Creek had seen in years. Sheets of rain lashed against rooftops, and fierce winds rattled windows in their frames. The dirt roads turned to rivers of mud, cutting off the small town from the wider world. Rusty stood at the edge of Emma Bennett's porch, his fur damp from the spray. The golden Labrador mix was restless, pacing in the shadows of the flickering porch light. Emma had noticed his unease earlier that evening. "Come inside, boy," she called, her voice soft but firm. Rusty hesitated, his ears perked as if listening to a sound only he could hear. Then he barked a sharp, urgent sound that made Emma's heart skip a beat. "What is it?" she murmured, stepping out into the rain. Rusty bolted, his powerful legs carrying him across the muddy yard and toward the woods. "Rusty, wait!" Emma called, grabbing her raincoat and flashlight. But Rusty was already gone, swallowed by the dark forest. The forest was alive with the sounds of the storm, wind howling through the trees, rain pattering against leaves, and the distant rumble of thunder. Rusty moved with purpose, his nose to the ground. Beneath the storm's roar, he heard it again, a faint, high-pitched cry. He found the baby at the base of a sprawling oak tree, half covered by a sodden blanket. The infant's cries were weak but insistent, her tiny fists clenched against the cold. Rusty whined softly, circling the bundle before nudging it with his nose. When the baby didn't respond, he grasped the edge of the blanket in his teeth and began dragging her toward safety. By the time Emma caught up, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, Rusty was emerging from the trees with the bundle in tow. "Rusty!" Emma gasped, dropping to her knees. She shone the light on the bundle and froze. "Oh my God," she whispered. She reached out, her hands trembling as she unwrapped the soaking blanket. The baby's face was pale, her lips tinged blue. Emma's training as a veterinarian kicked in. She scooped the baby into her arms, shielding her from the rain as she hurried back toward the house. "Come on, Rusty," she urged, her voice tight with fear. Rusty followed closely, his tail wagging slightly as if he knew the baby was in good hands now. Inside the warmth of her small home, Emma worked quickly. She dried the baby with soft towels, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and placed her near the fireplace. Rusty sat beside the makeshift crib, his eyes never leaving the infant. "Where did you come from?" Emma murmured, brushing damp hair from the baby's forehead. The baby stirred, letting out a small, pitiful cry. Emma reached for her phone and called the sheriff's office. As she explained the situation, she glanced at Rusty, who was still watching the baby intently. "You're a hero, you know that," she said, scratching his head. Rusty thumped his tail once in response. Emma barely slept that night. After the sheriff, Tom, came to take her statement and promised to investigate, she still couldn't shake the sight of the tiny, helpless baby lying in the rain. The baby, now sleeping soundly in a laundry basket cushioned with towels, was a mystery. There was no identification, no note, just the soaked blanket she had been wrapped in. Rusty, as if sensing Emma's unease, stayed near the basket, his body curled protectively around it. Occasionally, his ears twitched at the faint sounds of the baby's breathing. Emma sat at her kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea in front of her. The storm had finally passed, leaving the world outside eerily quiet. "How does someone just leave a baby out there?" she whispered, her voice breaking the silence. Rusty lifted his head, his intelligent eyes meeting hers. "I don't know what I'm going to do, boy," she admitted. Rusty didn't respond, but his gaze was steady and reassuring. The next morning, Emma called the local hospital to have the baby checked over. After receiving reassurances that the child was in good health, just undernourished and cold, Emma took her back home. She knew she couldn't keep calling her the baby, so she settled on a name, Hope. "Because that's what she is," Emma said to Rusty as the dog watched her prepare a bottle. "She's hope in the middle of all this craziness." Rusty seemed to approve, wagging his tail. The first few days were a whirlwind. Hope's cries shattered the peace Emma was used to, and her world quickly became a cycle of feedings, diaper changes, and naps. Rusty became her unofficial assistant, bringing her toys from the corner of the room or standing watch whenever Hope was sleeping. Despite the exhaustion, Emma couldn't help but feel a deep sense of purpose. While Emma adjusted to life with Hope, Tom was combing through the woods for any sign of the baby's origins. His deputy found an old, abandoned car on a dirt path a few miles away. Inside were a few scattered belongings, an empty diaper bag, a crumpled receipt, and a woman's scarf. Tom frowned as he inspected the scene. There were no signs of a struggle, but the car had clearly been there for days. Whoever left her didn't come back, he muttered. He took the scarf and the receipt, hoping they might lead to answers. News of the abandoned baby quickly spread through Willow Creek. It wasn't long before a reporter from the neighboring city arrived, eager to turn the story into a headline. The reporter, a young woman named Olivia Reed, was persistent. She showed up at Emma's clinic one afternoon, notebook in hand. "Ms. Bennett, is it true you're the one caring for the baby?" Olivia asked, her tone polite but probing. Emma hesitated. "I'm just fostering her for now. The authorities are still looking for her family." "And your dog, Rusty, is it? He's the one who found her?" Emma smiled faintly. "He did. He's a hero in this story." Olivia's eyes sparkled with interest. "That's amazing. Do you think I could write a piece on the two of you? It might help bring the baby's family forward." Emma considered it. She didn't want to draw unnecessary attention to Hope, but if it meant finding her parents. "All right," Emma said finally. "But please, keep the focus on helping her." The article ran in the regional paper the following week, complete with a photo of Rusty sitting proudly beside the laundry basket where Hope slept. It stirred up sympathy and curiosity, but it also caught the attention of someone Emma never expected to see again. Clara Hastings stood in the lobby of the sheriff's office, her hands trembling as she held the newspaper clipping. She looked disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, her face pale, but her eyes burned with determination. "That's my baby," she said quietly. Tom, who had been skeptical of every lead so far, raised an eyebrow. "You're the mother?" Clara nodded. "Yes. Her name is Lily." Tom gestured for her to sit. "Why don't you start at the beginning?" Over the next hour, Clara poured out her story. She had been in a relationship with a man named Derek, who became increasingly controlling and abusive after she became pregnant. One night, after Derek's threats turned physical, Clara fled with Lily. "I didn't know where to go," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I thought if I left her somewhere safe, someone would find her." "I didn't think it would take so long to get back." Tom listened carefully, taking notes. He wasn't sure what to make of her yet, but her story lined up with some of the clues they'd found. When Clara asked to see her baby, Tom hesitated. "That's not my decision," he said. "I'll have to speak with Ms. Bennett." Emma wasn't prepared for the wave of emotions she felt when Tom introduced Clara. "This is Lily's mother," he said gently. Clara looked fragile, her eyes darting nervously around Emma's cozy living room. But when her gaze landed on Hope, Lily, as she called her, it softened. Emma instinctively stepped between them, her protective instincts flaring. "You're her mother?" Clara nodded, tears welling up. "Yes. And I made a terrible mistake. But I want to make it right." Rusty, sensing the tension, stood between Emma and Clara, his tail stiff. "This isn't just about you," Emma said finally. "It's about what's best for Hope. And right now, she's safe here." Clara's shoulders sagged, but she didn't argue. Emma struggled with the idea of letting Clara near Hope. Despite the young woman's tearful confession and the sheriff's assurances that her story checked out, Emma's protective instincts wouldn't let her fully trust Clara. "I just need time with her," Clara pleaded during one of their first supervised visits. "I need her to know who I am." Emma crossed her arms, standing near the crib where Hope napped peacefully. Rusty sat beside it, watching Clara like a hawk. "It's not that simple," Emma said. "You left her. If Rusty hadn't found her." Clara winced, the guilt evident on her face. "I know I made a mistake. I'll live with it every day. But please, I just want to hold her." Emma hesitated before finally nodding. "Fine. But I'm staying here." Clara approached the crib slowly, her hands trembling as she reached for Hope. The baby stirred, blinking up at her. Clara's tears fell freely as she whispered, "Hi, Lily. Mommy's here." Watching the interaction, Emma felt a pang of sympathy but also an overwhelming sense of loss. She had started to think of Hope as her own. Rusty's behavior changed subtly after Clara's arrival. He was watchful, almost wary, especially when Clara was around Hope. Emma noticed it one evening when Clara came to visit. Rusty positioned himself between Clara and the baby, his body stiff. "Does he not like me?" Clara asked nervously. Emma knelt beside Rusty, running a hand over his head. "Rusty's a good judge of character. If he's cautious, it's because he senses something." Clara bit her lip, her gaze dropping to the floor. Later that night, as Emma tucked Hope into her crib, Rusty lay beside it as usual. "You're not sure about her either, are you, boy?" Emma murmured. Rusty wagged his tail softly but kept his eyes on the door. While Emma and Clara tried to navigate their fragile arrangement, trouble was brewing in the background. Derek, Clara's ex-partner, had been following her movements. He had seen the article about the baby in the paper and recognized Clara's name in the sheriff's report. It didn't take long for him to track her to Willow Creek. One evening, as Clara was walking home from Emma's house, she noticed a car parked at the end of the street. Her stomach dropped when she recognized it. "No," she whispered, her heart racing. She picked up her pace, ducking into a side alley. The car followed slowly, its headlights cutting through the dark. Clara fumbled for her phone and dialed Emma's number. "Emma, it's Derek," she said, her voice trembling. "He's here." Emma didn't hesitate. She locked the doors, turned off the lights, and called Sheriff Tom. "Rusty," she said, her voice firm, "stay with Hope." The dog barked in response, standing guard near the crib. When Clara arrived, she was pale and shaking. Emma ushered her inside and bolted the door behind her. "I thought I could stay hidden," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I didn't think he'd find me." Emma placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle this. But Hope's safety comes first." Rusty growled softly, his ears perked. Emma glanced at him, her unease growing. It didn't take long for Derek to make his move. A few nights later, he showed up at Emma's house, pounding on the door. "I know you're in there, Clara," he shouted. Emma held Hope close, her heart pounding. Rusty stood at the door, his growls low and menacing. "Go away, Derek." Clara shouted back. "Not without my family." Derek bellowed, slamming his fist against the door. Rusty barked furiously, throwing himself against the door. The noise startled Derek, who stumbled back. At that moment, Tom's patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing. Derek tried to run, but Rusty darted out as Emma opened the door, blocking Derek's path. The sheriff quickly subdued him with Derek in custody. Clara broke down in tears. "I thought I'd lost her forever," she said, clutching Hope tightly. Emma watched, a mix of emotions churning inside her. She knew Clara loved her daughter, but she also couldn't imagine letting Hope go. Rusty, sensing Emma's distress, nudged her hand. She smiled faintly, scratching behind his ears. "You're always looking out for us, aren't you, boy?" The evening was unusually quiet. Emma sat on the couch, cradling Hope, who was giggling softly as she waved a rattle in the air. Rusty lay at her feet, his golden fur glowing in the dim light of the fireplace. Clara, seated across from her, looked unusually tense. "Emma," Clara began, her voice breaking the stillness. Emma glanced up, immediately sensing the weight of what was coming. "What is it?" Clara hesitated, her eyes falling on Hope. "I've been thinking about everything, the choices I made, the ones I couldn't make. And I think you're the best thing that's ever happened to her." Emma blinked, stunned. "Clara, what are you saying?" Clara wiped her eyes, trying to maintain her composure. "I love her more than anything. But I know she's safe here, with you. You've given her more in these few weeks than I ever could. I think it's best if you adopt her." The room went silent except for the soft crackle of the fire. Rusty stirred, lifting his head to look between the two women as if understanding the gravity of the moment. "Clara, are you sure?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara nodded, though her tears betrayed the difficulty of her decision. I'll never stop loving her. I'd still like to be in her life, but she deserves stability, and you can give her that. The next few days were a blur of meetings and legal documents. Clara and Emma worked with social services to ensure the adoption process moved forward smoothly. Despite the official nature of their discussions, the bond between the two women grew. Clara often stayed after meetings to spend time with Hope, sharing stories of her own childhood and dreams for her daughter's future. One evening, after Clara left, Emma sat with Hope in her lap, watching Rusty play with one of his toys. "Looks like we're really becoming a family, huh, boy?" she murmured. Rusty wagged his tail, resting his head on her knee. Derek's incarceration brought a sense of relief to everyone involved. Sheriff Tom assured Emma that restraining orders and added patrols would keep him away, but Rusty never let his guard down. Emma noticed how Rusty continued to station himself near Hope's crib at night, his ears twitching at the slightest sound. "You're her guardian angel," she told him one night, stroking his fur. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Rusty responded with a soft bark, his gaze steady and reassuring. The community of Willow Creek, inspired by Rusty's heroics and the story of Hope's rescue, rallied around Emma. Neighbors dropped off baby clothes, toys, and offers of help. One day, while Emma was working at the clinic, Olivia Reed, the reporter who had written the original article, stopped by. "I'm working on a follow-up piece," Olivia said, smiling warmly. "People can't get enough of Rusty and Hope. Would you mind if I featured them again? It might bring in some support for your clinic too." Emma hesitated, but eventually agreed. "As long as it's about them and not me," she said with a chuckle. The article, titled "The Dog Who Saved Hope," went viral. Donations flooded in, and Emma was able to expand her clinic's services. Months passed, and Hope blossomed under Emma's care. Her laughter filled the house, and she grew more attached to Rusty, who seemed to thrive in his role as her protector. One evening, as Emma prepared dinner, she heard a small, excited voice behind her. "Roo! Rusty!" Emma spun around, her heart leaping. Hope was on the floor, reaching for Rusty, who wagged his tail furiously. "Rusty," Hope repeated, giggling. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she scooped Hope into her arms. "That's right, sweetheart. Rusty!" Rusty barked happily, nuzzling Hope's tiny hand. Clara, meanwhile, was making strides in rebuilding her life. She rented a small apartment in town and started working part-time at the library, where she found solace in books and community programs. She and Emma established a routine for her visits with Hope. While Clara struggled with her lingering guilt, Emma reassured her. "You're doing what's best for her," Emma said one afternoon as they watched Hope play with Rusty. "And for me," Clara admitted. "For the first time, I feel like I have a future." Just as life seemed to settle, Derek's shadow loomed once again. A letter arrived at Clara's apartment, a menacing note scribbled in haste. "You can't keep her from me. This isn't over." Clara immediately brought the letter to Sheriff Tom, who assured her that Derek remained in custody. But the threat rattled both her and Emma. Rusty, as if sensing their unease, became even more vigilant. He began patrolling the yard at night, his sharp barks breaking the silence whenever he detected movement. The inevitable happened one stormy night. Derek, having escaped custody, broke into Emma's house, determined to take Hope. Rusty's growls woke Emma, and she bolted out of bed to find the dog standing between Derek and Hope's crib. "Get out!" Emma shouted, grabbing her phone to call the police. Derek lunged for her, but Rusty intercepted him, his teeth sinking into Derek's arm. The man screamed, stumbling back as Rusty barked furiously. Within minutes, Sheriff Tom arrived, gun drawn. Derek was arrested, and Rusty was hailed as a hero once more. The ordeal brought Emma, Clara, and the entire community even closer. Clara decided to join Emma in taking self-defense classes, vowing never to feel powerless again. Hope remained blissfully unaware of the danger, her world filled with the love and safety provided by her family and, of course, Rusty. Years passed, but the story of Rusty and Hope remained a cherished tale in Willow Creek. Emma's life transformed in ways she never imagined, yet every day began and ended with the constants that had come to define her world: Hope's laughter and Rusty's steady presence. Hope, now 5 years old, was a bright, curious child with Rusty always at her side. She adored the dog, often curling up beside him with picture books, pretending to read to him. "Rusty," she'd say in her sweet, lilting voice, "you're my best friend." Emma, watching from the kitchen, would smile. She had once worried about Hope's future, but now she saw only joy and promise in her daughter's eyes. One crisp autumn afternoon, the town held its annual Harvest Festival. This year's theme was Community Heroes, and Rusty was the guest of honor. The square was decorated with hay bales, pumpkins, and strings of lights. A stage had been set up near the gazebo, where Sheriff Tom stood with a microphone. "We're here today to celebrate the heroes who make Willow Creek the special place it is," Tom announced. "And no hero has touched our hearts more than Rusty, the dog who saved Hope." The crowd erupted in applause as Rusty trotted onto the stage, his tail wagging furiously. Hope, holding his leash, waved to the crowd. "Rusty's not just a hero," Tom continued. "He's a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the incredible bond between humans and animals." A local artist unveiled a bronze statue of Rusty, capturing him in mid-bark, his eyes alert and ears perked. Clara had found her place in Willow Creek, becoming a key figure at the library and organizing programs for families. She and Emma worked as a team to raise Hope, balancing schedules and sharing milestones. One evening, as they sat on Emma's porch watching the sunset, Clara turned to her. "I never thought I'd have this," Clara said softly. "A second chance. A family." Emma reached over, squeezing her hand. "We've all been given second chances, Clara. And you've made the most of yours." As Hope grew, she remained curious about her beginnings. Emma and Clara agreed to share her story in age-appropriate pieces, always emphasizing the love and bravery that surrounded her. One day, while walking Rusty in the woods, Hope looked up at Emma. "Mommy," she asked, "why did Rusty save me?" Emma knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Because he has the biggest heart of anyone I know. He knew you needed help, and he wanted to protect you." Hope thought about this, then smiled. "I want to be like Rusty when I grow up." "You already are," Emma said, pulling her into a hug. Rusty barked, as if agreeing. The years rolled on, and while Rusty grew older, his spirit never wavered. He remained Hope's loyal companion, a constant in her life as she blossomed into a kind, empathetic young woman. When Rusty passed peacefully in his sleep one summer night, the town mourned. But his legacy endured. In the statue at the town square, in the stories people shared, and most importantly, in the love he inspired. Hope, now a teenager, stood beside Emma and Clara during a small ceremony in their backyard, where Rusty was buried beneath a sprawling oak tree. She placed a bouquet of wildflowers on his grave, tears streaming down her face. "He'll always be with us," Emma whispered, wrapping an arm around her daughter. Hope nodded. "He's my hero forever." Years later, Hope returned to Willow Creek as an adult, becoming a veterinarian like Emma. She dedicated her life to caring for animals, inspired by the dog who had once saved hers. On the clinic's wall hung a portrait of Rusty, his eyes shining with warmth and courage. Beneath it was a simple inscription. "In memory of Rusty, who taught us all what it means to love unconditionally." Hope often found herself gazing at the portrait, feeling his presence in every decision she made. "Thank you, Rusty," she would whisper. And in the quiet moments of her life, when the wind rustled through the trees or the stars shimmered in the night sky, she felt his spirit with her, forever a guardian, forever her hero.